So today I thought I'd have a go at a hare in a landscape. I've got some colours mixed up. I'm going to come on with some water first of all. I'm going to avoid the eye. That's the only bit that I'm avoiding. I've drawn it out. I'll talk you through my colours as I pop them on. So, a bit of water in the background, all over the hair. We're going to do something called underpainting today. A nice even coat of water. So I've got round number 10. I've put about half a teaspoon of water and a pea-sized blob of paint into each of these. So the first one that I've got is raw sienna. So I'm going to come on to the hair. It doesn't matter if it goes further. I don't mind that. In fact, I encourage it. So I'm sweeping onto the hair and I'm sweeping further than the hair as well. I want this atmosphere to start. Rinse my brush off. I'm going to pop into the burnt sienna. So don't eliminate all the raw sienna. I just want you to dab in. Just took a little bit of blue there. That's the next colour. Again, let it flow further. Dab into the blue. I want you to dab a few little bits on. You try to look where it's cooler. It's quite nice to look for warm tones and cool tones within the hair. Helps you pick them out. And with this blue, I'm going to come a little bit into the background here. So circular motion. Start to get a little bit of something like a sky in here. A little bit further down, sweeping through. You take a bit of the green in. So this is a sap green, so it's a nice spring green. Just going to sweep that through, upward strokes. Nice and wet. Let it wisp and do its own thing. And drop down to a number 6. I've got a little bit of a pale rose here. I'm just going to dab some of that into the hair as well. You've got to be careful with the pale rose that it's not too overpowering. And then I can drop a few bits into the sky as well. If you mix them a little bit, you'll get purpley tones. You can bring a little bit into the sap green when we paint over that later as well. Watching this edge here, just going to dab that off a little bit with the brush. Okay, so the last colour I'm going to use is Neat Sepia. What I want to do is to start to get an idea of where these darks are. So there's a bit of dark within the ear. Because it's neat, it doesn't flow too much and it gives a really nice softness. A little bit of dark down here. A little bit of dark around the neck area. I can just wisp through. Just starts to create that sort of fuzziness of the fur. I'm not doing any detail at this stage. I'm looking at lights and darks really. And tone. Just want a little bit there to start with. Okay, I'm going to dry that one off. Okay, so I'm going to tackle the eye next, and I've swapped down to a round number 2. This is dry. I've dabbed into some water and I've dabbed into some burnt sienna. The first thing I'm going to do is bring in some burnt sienna. Around the iris of the eye. Don't want to put any water in this because you don't want it to spread too far. Just a case of just moving that round. You need to preserve the white of the eye. I've dried my brush off, rinsed it off, dried it off, and I've come into the sepia now. And with the sepia, I'm going to put in the dark centre. So you could use something like Payne's Grey or black. I tend to prefer, if I can, to keep it a little bit lighter. I think it works better, and you're looking for the tiniest white dot that you're going to keep in that centre. The smaller the better, the more realistic it will look. With this neat paint, you're just going to keep applying it, and I want it to blend. So I want some bits to be darker in the eye, some bits to be lighter. Can also bring a little bit around the edge of the eye. Just really working on your brush control. Need that tiny little bit of white, so I'm just coming around the iris there, tiny little bit of white there as well. And I'm still not quite happy that I've got that light, that dot small enough. I have now. With that sepia still on the brush, I'm going to come into the nostrils. And down the front. The hare's nose and a little bit under there. Now I'm going to get my round number 6, make sure it's damp, take a little bit of water off with my fingers, and I want to soften this underside in. So if it's too harsh, then it looks quite cartoony, so you've got to really soften this in. So I'm just blending the underside really. Take that round. So it starts to spread a little bit. Just down one side. The same with the eye. So I'm just going to just touch each corner. And I can also just touch around that bottom edge, just so it softens in a little bit to the face. Rinse your little number 2 brush out. You should as well be able to take a little bit of light just from the bottom of the eye. So I'm going to start to work into the ears. Take a little bit of water, a little bit of sepia onto my brush, so this is the darker brown. Just bring that in down that side, so I've wet there and it's just softened in a little bit. Come to the top of the ear, and bring this sepia down this side. Just going to again soften just in places, just so it's not too hard. And I can also soften a little bit this way. So I'm just touching the paint, wetting further than it needs to go. Just soften it in there as well. Onto this ear. Come down this side. I'll take a bit of raw sienna, dab that in, bring that down that side, and now that's just settled a little bit. I'm going to take a little bit of raw sienna in there as well, into that ear. Clean brush again. This softening in is quite important. It just makes it feel all fluid. So I'm just touching in places, pushing further down. So these bits that can move around. Okay, so into this blue well, I'm just going to take a little bit of burnt sienna and cobalt blue, and I've made a grey here. So there's a bit more grey as we come further down. So I'm going to pop some grey. Down onto the nose. A bit on the side of the head here. So I'm just defining, there's quite a lot on the brush because I want it to stay quite fluid. It's important as I'm doing this that it's staying fluid and that I can move this around. I'll take a little bit in here. Rinse the brush off. I'm going to soften in. So just touch the paint, wet in between. Just dampen my brush. I'm just going to pull out some little wispy bits here. And bring that down to the nostril, just with a little bit of water. A few wispy bits here. You can see that underpainting underneath. So I'm just doing a few little wispy bits. It's just starting to come together. There's quite a lot of light this side. I'm just going to take a little bit in of the grey. Just spread that around. Don't want to take that light out of that top edge. Now, when this happens, so you've got some softening in that's gone a bit too far, this is because the paint's so wet. It's just a damp brush, clean damp brush, and you're just going to re-soften in. So I'm just pushing that paint back really. So you're just keeping an eye on what you've done so that it doesn't flow too much. So the beauty of wet in wet is that it does flow, but you don't want it to flow too much. I'm going to pop in a little bit of the burnt sienna. Just in places. And a little bit of the sepia just down here, so where we had the sepia before. And with my number 2, I'm just going to flick out a few bits of hair on the back there. Go back into the grey. I'm going to bring this down now. So I'm going to sweep down with a few strokes. Sweep this way with a few strokes. So I'm just following the line of the fur. It's the easiest way to explain it. Dab into burnt sienna. Just pop in a little bit of that, so where it looks a bit warmer on your hair, just pop a bit of that in, and then a little bit of the raw sienna. So these should all start to blend together, but you can still see that beautiful underpainting from underneath. Then neat sepia, and bring that in a little bit. And then if I get a rigger, so a long thin brush, just dab into the grey. Just want to create some strands for fur. A few on the back here. Just going to grab a little bit of kitchen towel. So I've spread this a little bit too far here, and I'm just going to dab off. If it doesn't come off, just take a little bit of water, just take that away, just that little bit, so it's not too far. And the same for taking out a little bit of light if you need to. As it starts to dry, you can just dab on, just take out a little bit of light in places. There's always a little bit. This is just a damp brush and a bit of kitchen towel. It's not quite dry, but it's dry enough for me to take a damp brush on. It's not soaking wet. And just lift a few bits of light out. tends to make all the difference. Got just a tiny bit more dark to come in, so keep it quite neat on the brush. You're just doing a few bits of definition. It's more fur effect than anything else now. Just want it to look furry. It's just making sure you've got that jaw line in. A bit more dark here. A bit more dark underneath here. These little bits, just give him a bit more character. He already looks quite cross. A little bit more dark in this ear. A bit of dark on the tip of that ear. Tip of that ear. And a few strokes just in there. A few strokes just in there. Okay, I'll dry that off. So the hair's pretty much finished now, and what we're going to do now is start to work in this foreground to start to build up some texture. And I'm thinking grassy field, brambly bits. So I'm going to take a little bit of water on, just at the bottom, and come over the bottom of the hair as well. And then I'm going to come into the green again. So this layer now is all about getting a little bit of texture, and we're going to use some clean film to do that. So plenty of the green is going on. Nice strokes. I'm using my round number 10. Some nice strokes upwards. If I dab into a little bit of the blue, loaded brush. Again, I'm just building up some depth here. A little bit of the sepia. If you load your brush with water, dab into the paint, that should be enough. And bring that through. When you're using clean film, you've got to make sure you've got enough of the dark in for it to develop that texture. Otherwise it doesn't do the texture thing if it's too pale. Okay, and what I'm going to do is grab some clean film, and we're going to lay it over the picture. I want you to stretch it this way. So what we're looking for is lines. We want lines to appear. You can move it around a little bit. What I want is like grassy lines. So all of these lines will develop into texture. And then we're going to work with that. So what I'm doing now is just pushing that colour so that I don't have one block of colour. So you should just be able to push it under your finger. And then I'm going to let that dry. Okay, so that's just about there, I think. And the eagle eye of you will see that I smudged my eye when I took the clean film on. I thought it was dry and it wasn't quite dry. So what I did to stop that was just take a damp brush and just lift that little bit out that I'd smudged there. It's recoverable anyway. If you see it straight away, you can usually just recover it, which is what I've done. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just take from a corner and very carefully peel. So what I'm hoping for is texture. If when you're doing this it starts to run back, it can still be a little bit wet, then just leave it where it is and give it another 5 minutes. So I'm just peeling this off now. I've got some really nice texture appeared. I need to dry that really well. I'm upside down for a reason, and I'll explain what that is in a minute. Okay, so that's dried now, and I'm going to spend some time working into the grasses. I find this easier to do upside down. I've got some neat sap green, which I'm adding a little bit of water to, and this is my round number 6. Now, I find it much easier to paint to a point painting downwards, hence why I've turned the hair upside down. And I'm just going to start to build up now. So I'm ignoring the texture that's there. I'm going to start to build more texture over the top. It's all transparent colours, so you'll see these layers underneath. This is just sap green coming over, nice and fresh, building up. Number 6, I can swap down to a finer rigger for some finer grasses in a second. You just want to add a nice depth now, and layering just builds that up. Layering on to dry builds that up. And take a little bit of blue, so you've got a slightly darker mix. And bring a few darker ones through. The darker ones should start to blend this edge. That we've got from the clean film. Just rest on my little finger. It's like a little pivot point. And just bring those through. Okay, the next colour that I've got is some Chinese white. So I'm going to use some of this neat, and I'm going to take in some Viridian or intense green. So this is going to make a turquoise. And then again, resting on my little finger, I'm going to start to bring some of this through. And swap to a rigger because I want these to be finer. I love to take random colours through, and turquoise is one that works really nicely. Just don't want it to be too thick a line. You can see these lovely fine turquoise lines coming in now. The paint's got a little bit of water, but not a huge amount. You want it to be thick enough that it's opaque. The Chinese white is making this colour opaque. Opaque to an extent, all watercolours are still transparent, but it's just enough. I want you to make sure when you're doing these lines, you're giving a nice random feel. It's not freshly mown. I'm thinking meadow here. That's coming through nicely now. And then another tip to help connect is if you just dab a little bit on the hair in a couple of places. I always say if you dab it in 3 places, it'll hold together in a picture. So if you're doing anything sort of semi-abstract, this works really nicely. I'm just softening that in a little bit, so you've got a few highlights of that on the hair. Rinse that off. And the last colour that I'm going to use is sepia. And that's going to tie it all together. I'm going to come through with a few darks. At this stage, don't be afraid to do some random twiggy bits that come across. It tends to work quite nicely. You can always twizzle around in between and just check what's happening as well. I know it's quite difficult when you're not used to painting upside down for you to gauge what's happening on the picture. I've been doing it years, so I'm quite confident that I know if I go in different directions that it's going to work. Make sure you're coming up over the hair as well. It's hidden in the undergrowth. It's working quite nicely. I'll dry that off and turn it back round. I'm pretty much there now. I could leave it as is and I'm quite happy. But I just wanted to show you something else. It's quite interesting to find little bits out of the garden that you can use to print onto your picture. Anything that makes something non-uniform works. So what I'm using now is a mixture of burnt sienna and Chinese white. And this is actually a poppy head that I've saved for seed. And it's dried out nicely and it gives a really nice effect. So I've painted on some neat paint and I'm just going to print it on. So what you're going to get is a little effect that works really nicely as little seed heads. Thinking cow parsley. What it's giving you is a random effect. So I'm going to do a few of these in a lighter colour, then a few in a darker colour, and every time I'm doing it something different is happening. I'm getting a different effect. I'm going to do the same with some sepia. You can overlap them. You can soften them in a little bit. I'll do that with a few in a second. If you use it more than once, you're getting a different effect each time. Like little flowers. Just need one more. Just give my brush a rinse off. So it just shows you can dabble with anything, and what I'm doing now is just softening some of them in. So that bit there I don't like, it's gone a bit blobby, so I can rectify that by taking some of the blobbiness out. So this is just a clean damp brush. I just keep rinsing it out. I'm doing different things on each one. So just randomly dab in. Just so each one looks a little bit different. Probably use this for flowers as well. If it goes a bit blobby, just dab a little bit off. I'm looking for that sort of seed head cow parsley effect, so I don't want it to go too solid. I prefer it to be much lighter. So you just achieve that by dabbing a little bit off if you need to. And there we go. There's a hare for you in a field. Hope you've enjoyed it.